Yo, what is going on, my fellow weebs? Chrono here, and welcome back to the channel. So, I want to do a quick little PSA video on, I guess you call it a specific weapon that has been talked about and has been used for quite a bit, a very important part of your daily NGS grind that I personally just haven't given enough time to. And I wanted to show you guys something that we came across in just last stream, actually. But before jumping that, if you guys are new here, as always, I am Chrono. I primarily cover PSO2 content. Would much appreciate a subscribe to right towards a 10K mark, hopefully by the end of this year. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this. You're probably wondering why I didn't just say the name of the weapon. It's because I always mispronounce it, and it's like ridiculously more difficult to pronounce. I'm sure plenty of you guys in the comments are going to tell me it's a teal or I don't know, man. I can't read. Streamers aren't here to read. YouTubers aren't here to read to you. Okay, you can't read. Anyway, this weapon is basically the go-to weapon of dex-based farming, and dex-based farming, as you know, is some of the best money making in the game you can get as of right now. The two major contenders are basically Redem Alnoth and Dex base, and this weapon is optimized at its level to be able to crush Dex based enemies. Why is that? In case you've been living under a rock and don't know why, with the higher level potentials, when we got them up to 6, a lot of potentials got massive bonuses. In this case, we have one that's 42% potency with 8% against non-boss enemies. So enemies other than bosses, basically just mobs in the field this does more damage to. Essentially a mobbing weapon. Now, those who are paying attention closely are going to see some things on here. They're like, oh, okay, I see what you're stacking, how this is working out. But some other of you out there are probably thinking, Brenda, you have a really strong wing guard. Why would you bother with making this other weapon, right? I've got a Fatale 4 wing guard that's got the burn combination. I actually want to change this burn combo and add in a defensive slot here, or a more offensive one of the two. I haven't decided yet. But I have a very strong wing guard with fairly powerful units. You're probably thinking to yourself, why bother with this weapon itself? Well, NGS does this funny thing with enemies that are lower level than you, where your damage kind of gets capped out, and you want to go for like an optimal amount of damage to be able to mostly one-shot enemies. And the mathers out there, those who are more adept at doing their own math as opposed to me that reports the math, have come out with this weapon being one of the best for specifically that dex-based farm. Now, I want to put a huge caveat on top of all of this because I'm sure plenty of you guys in the comments are going to jump on with this whole, you don't have to make this. Yes, this is not something you need to make. You can go in and farm dex base with literally the free weapons they give you, and you're perfectly fine. I mean, 1.4 mil over on ship 3 in an hour of just casually farming dex based along with skulls with some randos. It wasn't amazing. Granted, the more you optimize for it, the better money you're going to make overall. But you absolutely can make quite a bit of money in the course of an hour with just standard gear. That way you can go ahead and upgrade yourself. However, it was cool to think about these weapons with the context of our new EX augments. And what I found was pretty shocking. So shout out to one of my alliance mates who hooked me up with the fix on Wix daggers, which I've just multi-weaponed with some soaring blades. And then of course, technically I purchased other daggers that were color varianted, took his on Wix 5, slapped it on, multi-weaponed with some soaring blades, because why not color variant if you're making a weapon like this? And then we added on the EX augments. Now, the EX augment, the reason why this is so nice is because I don't have to worry about switching my class anymore. Usually you would swap to 4, so you would go with an optimized setup, primarily to be able to take advantage of the fact that you would be, you'd want to have PP regen at all times. Horse has a skill that allows you to regen PP every time an enemy nearby dies. Not that you kill them, but they die. And the same effect exists on an EX augment. So you can take this EX augment, slap it on one of your weapons, and now you have the reason why people went for sub in the first place. This allows you to essentially hot swap over. If you're someone like me who has hotkeys for his weapon swaps, you can hot swap over and just start attacking a group of enemies that are essentially lower level than you. That's kind of the other caveat with this when it comes to the math. This works out to be one of the best when the enemy is lower level than you. I think it might be about equal when they're on level with you. I don't know the math exactly there, but there are some things that we tested that I want to go ahead and present to you guys today. We essentially jumped into a cocoon and we tested out damage for enemies that were on level with us. What we found was about a 200 damage discrepancy between my wing guard and this weapon here. Now, we were just testing normal We're testing normal attacks. I didn't get Wingard's I didn't get the Wingard proc to go, like my burn combo to go when I was testing it, but what I found was that it was fairly close when we were hitting a non-weak spot. And the reason why we hit a non-weak spot is this fix on Wix. On Wix does more damage against non-weak spot enemies. Essentially, if you're hitting a random enemy that has no weak spot, or you're purposely missing the weak spot, like you very often do in AoE packs, you actually deal more damage. So having this available is basically, this is one of the best choices if you're making one of these weapons overall, is to get it with unwixed. Essentially, if you're playing a force, you're casting nothing but Zonde anyway, so it's not going to hit the weak element for the target. And if you're playing anything like Hunter or Waker, which are the two other optimal classes to use for PSC burst, then you're perfectly fine there too, because you're just spamming. Realistically, it's kind of optimizing for farming or just for mobbing, which you don't have to do a whole lot of in the first place, but it does work. I want to go ahead and present you guys the EXs that I'm using. So EX felled enemy PP gain, very important. Lively HP, I feel like, is kind of just standard here. You're not going to really worry too much about damage when you're mobbing. So being above 95% HP is pretty simple. Light attack just means that if you do get hit, you're going to take a lot less damage. So it's much easier to make sure that if you take a stray hit somewhere, that one use of a rest assign is going to put you right back up to full. So lively is very easy to go ahead and maintain. This is probably the most unimportant one of all three here. You could definitely swap this out with something like Tri-Shield or anything along those lines. Getting more PP regen is pretty much pointless. This is going to keep you capped when you're in PSE bursts, and then you're in mobbing situations, you're going to be mostly capped the entire time. So you don't really need to worry about this at all. The interesting thing that I came across was that against level 90 enemies, the damage was close, about 200 off between each other. Of course, we were testing crits because realistically speaking, crits are consistent when we look at the actual damage, since it's your max damage multiplier with everything that you have plus 20%. And it's the same thing every single time. Now, the crazy thing between these two weapons is you'll notice these are just LC augments. I didn't spend any money realistically on this. It's pretty much sitting at 29% across the board. Now, if you compare that to my Wingard's sitting at 36. So this is also not augmented equally in the slightest, giving the Wingard the edge when it comes to augments. A pretty substantial edge too, because as we know, when it comes to damage in PSO2, everything's freaking multiplicative. So percentages, even small ones, add up to being pretty crazy amount of damage differences. A lot more than you'd actually think. This is a long way of saying it's a good weapon to use if you're going to be setting yourself up doing any PSE bursting. This is basically the second coming of, what is it, the Crystal weapons or Crystal weapons, or I can't remember what they were called, but they were a weapon we had whose potential would give us back PP. Essentially, you could use them as an offhand weapon you'd swap to for bossing and things of that sort. But we always had to deal with the fact that it was technically less damage to use that. I said bossing, I meant mobbing. But you had to deal with the damage of the fact that it was technically less damage to switch over to that. But it allowed us to switch over weapons and then just do a bit of mobbing without having to worry about swapping our classes. Now we can get a fairly powerful weapon, a fairly good Fixa, if you happen to get this, of course. Fixa on Wix is very expensive. Going something like Fixa Attack is also pretty solid. If you're a Slayer, you can get away with something like Fixa Termina, realistically speaking. But Unwix and Attack are kind of like your go-tos in this situation itself, and that you really, really, really want to try to get. But you can throw, EXs on here. These EXs are not expensive. Enemy Felled and Lively HP are actually pretty inexpensive. I definitely get those two specifically and don't really care about your third slot. And just throw in LC augs. You're going to get a fairly powerful weapon. Again, I mentioned this at the very beginning of the video or very early on in the video. You don't have to make this weapon. The reason I'm making this video now specifically is because we currently have a campaign going on that reduces the cost of making weapons like this. And there'll be another one in the future. We're going to get one probably at some point during the PSO2 festival as well. So either, I would say, if you're going to make this weapon, take advantage of it then. You can see everything that's here. 90% success rate boost, limit break cost are minus 50%, augmentation, success rate plus 5%. I mean, this really doesn't matter very much because we're not really RNGing, but things, multi-weapon minus 50%. If you're going to do anything like this, do it now. It is actually worth doing if you're someone who likes to have multiple weapons. For me personally, you do not have to have this weapon. You can, again, use the weapon you have perfectly fine. But I personally use a burn weapon. It's nice to be able to swap over something for mobbing don't really have to think about what I'm doing. I can just spam my biggest AoE that I have and farm tons of money that way. Hopefully this helps someone out. If there's anything I missed, feel free to toss in the comments below. I'm curious, if you made one of these weapons, what's the combination you personally went for? I would say it's pretty staple no matter what the situation is going to be to have lively HP and enemy felled, but enemy felled is the only one that's absolutely necessary. Technically, these two can be swapped out, and I'm sure there's probably some combinations that I'm personally not considering. Toss them in the comments below, and I'd love to read about them. Again, shout out to our channel member, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care, my friends. Peace out.